Welcome everybody to class. We're going to try something a little bit different today just because it's going to save me a lot of writing on Blackboard. So, yeah, you're going to listen to your lecture a little bit and I'll kind of jump back and forth in between. So today we're starting a new book. Nope, that's not going to work. Okay, so today we're starting our new book, book 2. And we're going to start with late Renaissance polyphony. So it's going to be a lot of actual review because you've already done it when we did counterpoint before, which was, early Renaissance polyphony. Not that much has changed. So we're going to do a little bit of review of that, and then you'll have your assignment, and it should be fairly clear and simple. So hopefully it is. All right, so let's get started. I'm going to lecture from the podium. I apologize. All right, so late Renaissance polyphony. There's just a couple of things that you need to be aware of. Now, 16th century music is modal, all right? And these were the most common modes. Now, if you have the newest edition of the book, you've got a couple extra modes thrown in there. But generally, as a rule, and I went over this in the other lecture as well, but if you need to find your mode, you basically start, if you're on Dorian, D for Dorian, always remember that, and then you can just go in order from there. You start on D on the piano, and then you just play white keys up to D, and those are your notes, and that's where your half steps and whole steps fall into. Now, that said, when we get to the late Renaissance, and we do experience some of this in mid-Renaissance, when we did counterpoint last time, we experience something called musica ficta, all right? Musica ficta are just altered tones, i.e. accidentals. So flats and sharps. Basically what they would do is if some of these modes, they don't have a half step between the 7th step and the tonic, right? So between steps 7 and 8, like our normal major scale, so they make the major by inserting that, all right? And this is kind of where our first experiences with accidentals come in. This is where we get that from. All right, so if you look at figure 1.1, you'll see, bam, right there, B flat, it's lowered, all right? So a leading tone is created with this A, right, by lowering the B flat. So you always raise the 7th scale degree. So you can see here, modes requiring a raised 7th. We have Dorian mode, Mixolydian mode. Honestly, you're never going to use this past probably this. So I apologize. Bear with me. All right, so Dorian, we have a half step, so they raise the C sharp up. Normally it would just be a C natural, all right? Mixolydian, same thing. They raise the F sharp. Normally it would just be an F natural, i.e. you're playing all white keys on the keyboard, right? So this is where they do this. They break the rules. They add this thing. Now, modes that naturally have a half step between step 7 and 8, we have Phrygian and Lydian, all right? So they already have a half step. D, E, D, E, F, E, right? E, F. So those are already naturally occurring. I'm never going to test you on it. Don't worry about it. So if we look at transposed modes, you should know that occasionally they would transpose a mode, and it's just like any other key, right? So if you've got C major, right, you're going to have its whole, whole, half, whole, 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 half. Right? In the case of Dorian, we've got whole step, half step, whole step, whole step, whole step, half step, whole step. Now all you do is transfer it, right? So instead of starting on D, we move to G. Woohoo! And then we apply the same thing. So we've got whole step, half step, whole step, whole step, whole step, half step, whole step. All right? So you just put that template on, and that's the transposed mode. They do the same thing with Phrygian. All right? So it's just treat it like any other scale. It's not special. It's the same as major and minor. It's just a different collection of half steps and whole steps. Same thing with Lydian and Phrygian. Oftentimes they transpose it down a fifth. That's all you have to do, okay? And then they throw a B flat in there. All right, so that's what that is. Let's see. So let's talk about consonances. There isn't a whole lot that's changed since we last talked about it. Our consonances are perfect unison, perfect octave, perfect fifth. Again, you can't have parallel fifths or octaves or unisons. Major third, major sixth, minor third, minor sixth. All right? Now, one thing you should be aware of when we're dealing with this, we're going to be dealing with, in our assignment, a three-voice part that you're going to have to analyze because you haven't really done that before. And so you've got to find the lowest sounding note. In this case, if you look closely, you've got that little 8 underneath your treble clef. This means if you see an 8 underneath, it means an octave. It's going to sound an octave lower. Okay? So it's written as D, but it's actually going to your ears, this D up here, it's going to sound down here. Okay? So that's, and also you'll see it written as 8V V. All right? So an octave below. Conversely, if you see a soprano part with an 8 up here, it means that's going to sound an octave higher. Or you'll see something like 8VA. All right? So the octave above. That's a common thing to know. So you want to identify the lowest sounding note. So in this case, we've got an A, right? And that's going to sound on this scale right up, let's see, A, that would be like right here, right? So in this case, this was the lowest note. Now when we get to here, we've got right here, that's your lowest sounding note because we don't have anything going on. It's rest, right, in the bass line. So we're only comparing these two. Now, when you're comparing groups of 3 notes or 3 parts, you're going to compare the bass and the tenor, all right? So that's a fourth. This A up here, right? So you've got A to D. And then you're going to compare the bass and the soprano, all right? So that's this one. So that's the A. We're going to move it up a couple octaves, and the E. So you've got a fourth between the bass and the tenor, and a fifth between the bass and the soprano, minus a few octaves. All right? You're never at any point going to compare these two together. All right? You just want to compare the bottom to the middle and the bottom to the top. Cool beans? All right, so, and then what they do is they actually square off the lowest sounding note, which in this case, notice that actually this high D, which would sound up here, right, based on this octave lower scale, is actually a higher note than what the tenor or alto or whatever that is singing, right? So this now becomes the lowest note. All right? So then you're going to compare this note to this note, right? So you've got this A and E, low A down here to E, so that's a fifth. So it's going to be the bass. So you're always comparing the bass note, the lowest note, to the other two voices. And now you've got to compare these two, right? So this D up here and the B and the A are a fourth apart. So right here, you've got your 4 down there, okay? So that's how you're doing that. So compare the bass, whatever the lowest note is, not just the bass part, but the lowest note to whatever else is going on, all right? So that's how that works. So sometimes you have to do some tricky stuff to identify what the actual lowest note is. So here's some concepts of tonal harmony, how you can use dissonance, how you're allowed to get away with dissonance in late Renaissance polyphony. So of course our dissonant notes are major second, major seventh, minor seventh, and perfect fourth up here, okay? Now there are times when you can use these, and it's sort of the same, a lot of the same rules as what we talked about when we have non-harmonic tones, right? So think passing tones, neighboring tones, appoggiatura, all of that stuff, okay? So we have here an example of this acting as a passing tone, right? So we've got a third here, and then we move up to here to a fourth, but it's moving up stepwise, so it's acting as a passing tone. That's why they get away with it, okay? So this is an unaccented passing tone, which means it's going to wind up on beat 2 or 4, all right, in a 4/2 meter. So here's our fourth beat, right? We've got 1, 2, 3, 4, okay? So that's the fourth beat. So it'll end up on, on the weak beat, okay? Accented passing tones are going to be on a strong beat. Oh, wait. Okay, so accented passing tones also only occur on beat 2 and 4. Okay, so in 4/2, which means 4 half notes, you've got 1, 2, 3, 3, 4, and, okay? So also only occurs on 2, usually going to be in the form of a quarter note, FYI. And they can only show up in a descending direction. So they can only go down, not up. All right? Now another option, lowering neighbor tone. And you guys are aware of all of these, right? I mean, here we go. So here, we've got a fourth here. It's acting as a passing tone, right? This guy right here is going between the two. And then here, we've got 3, 2, 3. So it's a lower neighbor tone. So it's going to go down, and that's the only neighboring tone that's allowed. So it can't go up. All right, so it can't go 3, 4, 3. You can only go 3, 2, 3. Does that make sense? Here we've got another passing tone. And then they're going to have another passing tone right there. Pardon me. Okay, so suspensions, also an option, and we know all about suspensions. We've identified them. Same thing. Here's the preparation, suspension, 3 to 2. This is our dissonance, and then it resolves back to 3. Okay? Now here's a new one. This is a little bit new. It's a figure that's pretty specific to the Renaissance. It's called a portamento. And it's sort of a rhythmic figure where you can get away with it. There's a better example, portamento over here.